Howdy folks, thanks for coming back to the channel. Today in our Defensive Shooting Fundamentals series, we're going to be talking about proper pistol fitment and grip. At the end of the day, there are four things that you need to do with the pistol. You gotta pick it up, you gotta point it at your target, you've gotta press the trigger without moving the muzzle off of the target, and you gotta repeat steps 2 and 3 until you no longer have a problem, or you've satisfied the course of fire that you're in on your competition or whatever course that you're shooting. So to begin with, let's talk about grip and how that is going to help us to control a firearm. The first thing that we want to do with our dominant hand is to make sure we're holding the gun as high as possible on the grip or the frame, as high as possible as we can without interfering with the function of the slide as it recoils back and forth. Next thing that we want to do is make sure that our trigger finger is well away from the trigger guard, above and resting on the frame. A good tactile place to do that is this seam here between the frame and the slide. It's a good spot to hit your finger every time. You also want to make sure that the first knuckle on your dominant hand is on the opposite side of the frame, and we'll get more into why that's important for healthy bone structure in a little bit. And lastly, you want to make sure that your middle finger is pressed up against the trigger guard on the grip. Now from there, you've got your weak hand. What you want to do with that is you've got all this space here on the gun to fill up to get more traction and control on the pistol. So you're going to take the base of your weak hand thumb and you're going to place it somewhere in this gap between your middle finger and the base of your dominant thumb, like so. Again, just like with your dominant hand, you want to make sure that your weak hand is as high as possible on the gun. Because what we're doing here is as you fire the gun and the slide goes rearward in recoil, it has leverage. That recoil creates leverage on your body. And the higher you can hold it, the less leverage it is going to be able to act on you. So we've got the base of our thumb between our dominant hand thumb and middle finger. We have our index finger on our weak hand also pressed up against the trigger guard, and our fingers parallel to it, parallel to the fingers on our shooting hand. And we want to make sure that our thumbs are layered and not crossed like this. Make sure they're layered, because when we cross them, that takes the meat of our palm off of the grip of the gun and can create some area for movement. So we want as much skin on the gun as possible, as much traction as possible to control that firearm and keep it pointed at the target. And the last thing we want to make sure is that there's no gaps between the heels of our hands at the back of the gun and between our thumbs. So that is the basis of good grip. And what we want to be able to make sure with proper fitment is that we have a good natural point of aim. So the way you hold the pistol doesn't change. Every time you grab it, you should have a high grip on the pistol, index finger, and everything that we just talked about. You should be practicing all those concepts every time you touch a gun. What you want to make sure when you're looking for proper fit is that the gun points naturally for you. Everyone's body is slightly different, and some angles and widths and gun shapes change how they point from person to person. So what we want to make sure we can do is that we establish a good grip on the gun, and then we pick a target somewhere and we extend that pistol out straight from our chest to our target, in parallel to our line of sight, and get our arms as straight as we can possibly make them. And what you want to make sure is there for you is that the gun is pointed at the target, and what we mean by that is that it's obviously, we can see that it's pointed at the target that we're looking at, and that the pistol is parallel to the ground, so we don't have any, upward or aggressively downward trajectories. And that way we can know that the pistol points well for us. Now, I'm confident that I can grab any pistol pointed at the target and be able to shoot well. But that doesn't mean there aren't some grips that I prefer over others that make it easier. So don't get too caught up in, oh, this pistol is the absolute best. It has, the only perfect grip on the planet. That just doesn't exist. And as you become a more competent shooter, it's going to matter less and less. But what we're looking for in choosing a defensive gun is something that fits us well, that we can hang on to with that proper grip, and that we can point at a target and have the easiest, kinesthetic or natural point of aim with that pistol. And a quick note, I mentioned earlier in the video, we were going to talk about why it's important to make sure that your dominant hand's thumb's knuckle is on the other side of the gun, is because if you have a gun that's too big for you and you can't reach the trigger comfortably, we tend to cheat our hand around the gun. And what that does when the gun is too big for us is it puts this joint right behind the center of the pistol, and that recoil can eventually cause some joint issues for us. So again, just wanted to touch on that. When you have a proper grip and a gun that fits you well and you can point naturally at the target, that's going a long way towards being a competent defensive shooter.